Okay, so I've got a very basic perspective set up from this this same model or project that I've been looking at with in a very small space there, so that I can just demonstrate some more aspects of rendering, still focusing on materials. And so this time I'm going to look at the rendering or the appearance aspect of your materials in Revit. So I might start with something simple like the wall over here, and I'm just going to go to Edit Type, and then you can see I've got quite a few walls that have been pre-made, and it's not a bad idea at first if you do use those, but because I wanted a slightly different wall to the ones that I've got in the panel there, I'm going to make a new one just by going to Duplicate, and I'm going to call this brick. Also, not even brick, I'm just going to call it retaining wall. I will make it brick, but I want to change it to a few different materials. So I'm just going to call that retaining wall for now. And then I'm going to go to Edit. And we've looked at this already using the layers there to add in new components. I'm going to go to Insert and have another layer of brickwork. So I'll start with brick anyway. Make that 110. And then insert again and make it have a 10mm model layer, I suppose, and make this one at the bottom 110, and might move that down. Move the one at the top down. You don't really need to show mortar as a separate layer, but I just thought I'd do that so you can see clearly what each of these elements are. And I'll have let's say the top as substrate. Sorry, not that one. So that's, not that it really matters. They could all be structure actually. And then going into the materials, you can see I've got finish there for the top and by category for the others. So I'm going to maybe start with the top. And when this happens, don't worry, it's common when you're working on a computer that hasn't got a lot of graphics processing power for it to take a minute just to load up the material or the rendering engine. So to bring this up, it needs to use the rendering module, and so that can take a minute the first time you do it. Once you've done it once, though, it should go a lot faster. So I've got here a masonry brick brown material. And again, if I go to Appearance, you can see there the setup. So yeah, we've already looked at the graphics panel and how you can make materials. So I'm just going to quickly repeat that. So I'm going to duplicate this material and then call it masonry. Masonry brick will do. And then going to Appearance. The first thing you need to watch out for, and I think I've touched on this briefly, when you're working with the Appearance tab with Revit, you have the opportunity or potential to have this appearance used by many materials. So if you see a number other than 0 there, that means this appearance is used by something else. So in this case, we know what it is. It's the one I started with, masonry brick brown. And so they're both using this appearance called uniform running brown. And so if I want to make changes to this one without brick brown changing, I need to right click on Appearance and use one of these options. Either duplicate or generic, duplicate as generic, or replace. Any of those options. And so if I just wanted to change the settings over here, duplicate would be a really good option. So you can see nothing's changed down here, but the name has changed. It's just added a 1 there in brackets, and I've got 0 there above the hands to show that it's not being shared by any other materials. And then you can see that the material type is masonry. So that's, I suppose, the first thing. If you really want to learn how materials work for rendering, especially with the new setup Autodesk are developing, then you need to have an idea about material templates. And so it started with Mental Ray actually. Mental Ray had some different basic materials set up using their material called Arc and Design, which basically gave you a bunch of settings or preset setups for different sorts of materials like masonry, but you've also got one for wood. So you might see, I'll just quickly show you, if we go down to some of these wood materials, you can see there that it's a wood type. If we go back to another one, let's see this one here, even though this is a wood material, it's actually a generic material type. If I go to one of the glass materials, you can see it's a glazing material type. So those settings, going back to masonry, those settings that you have there are there because of the type, and a lot of them are going to be hidden. So if you're on glazing, for example, you can't add an image. So if you're going to add an image to a material, or if you want to use an image or a texture, you need to have the right material type selected there. And unfortunately with Revit, you can't make your own material type from scratch. You have to get a material that's using that material type and then modify it. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. But then the other option is duplicate as generic. So generic material is actually the base material for everything, and that gives you all the settings.
Then you can change the image, you can change the...
Exactly, yeah. So I'll show you one here that's generic. Okay, so that generic one, you can see it's got a lot more different panels down here, which is good and bad. It sometimes will give you a lot more flexibility, but also you need to know what these values do. So with the glass material, or the glazing material type, you've got reflectance and sheets of glass and colour. But with generic, you've got reflectivity, and it's got these two different values. So it's a little bit more involved. Going back to masonry, the one that I had before, it does give you the option of choosing an image. And so that is probably the most common shader people use with Revit. But there are others. So if you do have the option of adding a shader, and that means using something other than a simple colour value or a single value to give or to control the thing you're modifying. Again, image is common, but you have these others, checker, gradient, and so on. So they're using a formula, essentially, to generate a pattern instead of an image. So when you go to checker, for example, you give the size of your checker, and it's a quite useful material for things like tiles and things like that. So you give a size and the colour for those two checker patterns. If you go to one like wood, you see it's got values for the noise and those other things. So because it's procedural, and again, so in other words, generated by a formula, it won't tile. So you won't notice repeating patterns. It'll just look seamless to infinity, which is a big advantage. If you're using an image, that's right, the tiling can be pretty obvious. So you've got to use images that are set up to repeat without noticeable seams. And so this one already is set up like that. And so you've got two ways of choosing the image. You can either click on the image swatch and then you can see the name there of the file, or you can just click onto the image name below if you just want to change the image. And like I was saying, that's probably the most common shader. You'll use it first. So you have here the default library that comes with the program. When you install Revit, you get the Autodesk Material Library, which is a standard rendering library that you have across all the different Autodesk programs nowadays. Revit, AutoCAD, 3ds Max, Maya, they all give you that Autodesk Material Library. Like I was saying, Autodesk are pushing a new approach with their, especially with materials, to make them render agnostic. In other words, not dependent on the rendering engine you use. Which means that you can use that material with Mentor Ray or Arnold or V-Ray and still have the same setup. So that's a big advantage, and it means that Autodesk Material Library will work across all those different programs. So essentially, in the old days, you would have to learn a different setup for the materials for every different rendering engine. But again, Autodesk are changing that quite a bit. So again, clicking on the image there, the name, just so you can see these come with the program. If you look in here, you can see where they live. So it's a bit of a funny path, but you'll get used to it. So common files, Autodesk shared, and then that's where your materials folder is, which has your textures. And you've got different qualities. So if you go to the level above that, we've got 1, 2, and 3, which are different resolutions. So they're all the same images, but again, just different quality. So you get those with the program, but that's nowhere near enough. There's a lot of materials in there, but nowhere near the amount you need in real life. So if we go to the folder on the P drive, I don't think I've copied across my full material library yet. I'm just going to go to, the class folder. I think I started to copy it, but it's big. Yeah, I haven't copied the whole thing yet, so I'm just going to start copying that actually. And hope it doesn't crash everything. Here it is. Okay, so this is a folder I've got which just has textures for rendering. So I'm going to paste that across now, so that will be there fully copied, I'd say, within about 20 minutes. And you can see there it's still counting the size. It's a lot bigger than that. I know it's about 80 gig. So if you want to copy it and take it with you, you're welcome to, but you'll need quite a bit of storage for that. And even that's not enough. That's one of my main material libraries. I've actually got about triple, or a bit more than triple that on my own servers. And even that's not enough for me. And so I'll often go searching for more textures when I'm doing rendering work. So? Yeah, that's right. Well, it's just amazing how many different materials people use in their designs. And so I'm always getting different ideas, often from students and from people researching things that I haven't thought about before. Anyhow, this is a bit of a selection that you can see there. So these are different images, all set up to be used for materials. So these mostly are seamless. Some of them aren't, because it wouldn't make sense. So for these ones that are used for trees and things like that, they're obviously not seamless. Some they're used for facades. But again, many of them are, or the majority are seamless. So I've got some more brick materials here. I'm just going to choose one. Once I finish copying. So I thought they'd copy a little bit faster than this, but it's nearly there. Okay, so once you've chosen your image, what else do you think is going to determine its appearance? What's probably the most important thing after choose exactly the scale and the size? So for bricks, it's fairly easy to work out because bricks have a standard size. Well, let's go back. I'm just going to use the other ones for now, and then I'll come back to that folder, but that should be copied before long. Okay, so to work out the size of bricks, sticking with this image, I'm sure you know the size of a standard brick. Yep, by what's the height?
76.
Yes, that's right, spot on. Yes, 76. Actually, it's a funny one. I think I might have told you this before. Some people will say 75, some will say 76. Yeah, well, that's right. You can. If you're wondering why some people say some say 75 and some say 76, it's because it's neither. It's in between. The way you're supposed to do it, the way bricklayers are supposed to do it according to the standard, is 7 courses per 600 mil. So that's why a lot of building materials are done in increments of 600. That's your standard. That's one of your standard measurements. It all comes from the old thing of a foot. So a foot is 304 mil or 304.5, and so 300 is close to that, and so that became the standard when things moved over to metric. So 600 divided by 7, 85.7 whatever. So that's the way they're supposed to lay bricks, so that they line up with 600 increments. So the reason it's 85, not 75, 85.7, is because, the mortar is 10 mil. So, so the bricks are, they're variable size anyway. They're not made they're made within a tolerance of millimetre, but the mortar is then used to adjust the spacing. But if you use 86, that is fine. Or even 85. So if it's, let's just say it's 85 actually. So if we've got, what is it there? You can see between this top and bottom dimension, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 courses. So 16 times 86, or 85, make it. Right, so that's 1360. So this is wrong. And bricks are different sizes in different parts of the world, so that's the way it was for the people who made this, but it's not right for what we need. So I was going to change the height there to 1360. And Australia actually had one of the first standardised brick sizes. And because of that, there aren't too many variations. Not like, England, they've still got dozens of different brick sizes. But because clay is quite a common resource, especially around Sydney, they did develop that quite early. And so you can rely on that size even with older buildings from the 19th century, really. So it makes life much easier, definitely. So there you can see I've changed the height. The width changed automatically. So they should change proportionally. Exactly, yeah. Locks proportion or locks aspect ratios. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to close that one, and the bricks will be slightly bigger. If you expand this, you can also change the thing that it's previewed on. In some cases that can help. It's a bit slow there. And also the render quality. So I've got it on production quality. It's going a bit slowly, but I can go to medium quality to speed that up a bit. So then, because this is masonry, the only other option is the relief pattern. Don't worry too much about tint. And so you can see there, it's using a different image. Now, it should be clear here, but it's probably a bit hard to see. I'm going to increase the bump. So you can see there it's got this black and white image. If I increase that, increase the amount, there, you can see it now. So you can see there, I've got these bumps, but they don't line up with the original image, because the size of my bump map isn't the size of my original image. I've changed the image, so I've got to go and now change the bump map to match that. So 1360, and then the bumps line up again with the image.
That will save you from doing reveals. Like if you were, you don't redo reveals on brickwork, but can you change it? If you were to do reveals on walls, could you do it from here?
Not really, no. You mean want to have the reveal with a different surface?
Yeah.
No, you do a different material for that. Yeah, so you make a new material and then just paint it or something like that.
Because you can't really do reveals on an angle.
No, so for that again you have to make a different material. It's one of those with Revit, it just won't do it automatically, unfortunately. Yeah. No, I played around with a lot with that, trying to get the reveals to happen automatically, and even do them in families, it's difficult. So that's an example of another shader. So you've got shaders, which are these different ways of giving a pattern, whether it's an image or one of these procedural options. But then you have different ways of plugging those into the materials. And so relief pattern is a good option for bricks and tiles. And if we go to a generic, you'll see that there are, again, plenty of others. So relief really is using a bump map. And then Another good example maybe is a transparency map. So for stained glass, for example, you might want part of the glass to be darker than another part, and you can use an image to say which parts are dark, which parts are light. So going back to this material again, so you've got finish options there, which is again using a preset glossy matte unfinished. Glossy brick looks terrible actually, but just doing that to show you. With generic materials, that would be a mix of reflectivity and the glossiness option here. So I'm going to set that back to unfinished. And so now that I've made that material for the top layer, I can use that same material, of course, for the bottom layer. Okay. Now I can't see anything here because this is in shaded, so I'm going to go to realistic, and then we'll see that texture out there. So I've got textures on some of these other objects, and I'll just select one so I can see. If I go to edit type, this family doesn't give me the option of changing that in the type properties, and it's not in the instance properties either. So in situations like that, you just have to remember what I went through last time with materials. Exactly, you've got to edit the family, and actually a good trick I can show you there, in perspectives you can't easily edit that directly. You can go to a different type of view and then just go to edit family from there. But if you don't want to open another view, you should be able to go down in the project browser to your families section, where every family in your project is going to be listed. And so we know this one, I'll just select it again, so it's, what is it, Coskeller Mica 3000 by 1100. So if I go to furniture, and then it's not there, so that must be not the category. It's a generic model actually, so that you can see the category there. So it'll be in generic models here. And there it is, Coskeller Mica. So then I can right click there, and actually, sorry, this is Revit 2015. Revit 2016, you can go to edit there. But unfortunately, again, with 2015 you can't. So, okay, so I would have to go to another view. So I'll just go to floor plan, and then we get the edit family option. Okay, so there's my desk. And yeah, so what people often do then is go back to the family file to change the material. But it won't work. If I select that, you'll see it does have this material Timber 2, but that's already been loaded into the project. So if I change Timber 2 here in the family, and I'll just show you, it is this timber texture. So I'll change that. I don't like that timber anyway, so I'm going to just select this. And I'll change it to a better image. There we go. So it's got this, it's actually just using noise. And so instead I'm going to go to image there. And I'll choose something from that library that should have mostly copied across by now, material images, and I have a wood folder there. These computers. Okay, there we are. Is it working now? Gotcha. Okay, it's doing the next stage. Yours probably, hopefully, aren't this slow. But, yeah. One of the best investments you can make is getting a fast computer, because for this work, yeah, you don't want to be waiting around. So, okay, so I've got some wood textures down here. Again, I'll just have to wait a second for the preview to come up. But while it's happening, I'll talk to you about my new computer. It's workstation. It was $5,000 new 6 months ago. but well, actually, sorry, about 9 months ago. But the 3D lab that bought it ended up not needing to have so many people working on the project, and actually just had it in storage the whole time. And I bought it for a bit under 800. And yep. So if you go searching, you can find some good deals, but you need to know what you're looking for. And so for this work, for 3D work especially, yeah, well, but also it's about having a certain type of computer. That's why these computers struggle, because throughout most of TAFE, they're just a standard, office-type computers. They've spec'd them up. They've put the right specs in, so they've got decent processors, they've got graphics cards, so they should be able to do it, but they're not workstations. So workstations, when people hear workstation, they think desktop, and they think big old large computers. But really, a workstation is just a different class of computer. You can get workstations that are laptops. So I've got 4 or 5 workstation laptops that have high-end graphics cards, tons of RAM, good processors, but more than that, the whole architecture of the computer is different. And they're supported. Well, the software is actually authenticated or tested by the Autodesk and the people who make it using those workstations, and they'll have machines that are certified for the software. So so again, if you can get a workstation, they are expensive if you buy them. You can't buy them in normal computer shops. You have to go to a specialised or specialist reseller like Storm Effects or CAD Group or one of those companies that sells the Autodesk software, and they do sell workstations, but you can't find them in Harvey Norman or shops like that. They just don't sell them. But again, if you know what you're looking for, you'll find them online. Go to the Dell website. You'll find they will sell them to you directly. But again, sometimes buying something that's a little bit older and upgrading it. So when this new one I bought, I put solid-state drives in. It actually was spec'd originally with solid-state drives, but the company that bought it, for different reasons, had to put the old spinning disc drives back in. So I just made a few changes like that, and it's running faster than even the 3D workstations that we have at the college at Enmore, where we do actually have workstations anyway, but not quite as good. So finally, it's almost there. Sorry about this. It's just a bit slow. But I've got there some timber textures coming up. I'm not going to wait for the one that I wanted because it's just going to take too long, but I'll get here at least some sort of timber in a moment. It should be there. Yeah. I'll just go for this one, that'll do. I mean, there's also the network that can be a problem, but a better computer is going to do network tasks faster as well.
Put everything on the highest render quality?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, on my own computer, yeah. I mean, I've got, with 3ds Max, using V-Ray, I've got it set up to do real-time rendering, basically, so...
How long will it take to render without? Do you render without?
Not really, no. So, I mean, with Revit I will a little bit, but I think V-Ray does a much better job. And so, yeah, I do everything with V-Ray. Yeah. Okay, so, not the texture I wanted, but it'll do for now. So, really, I just wanted to show you a little thing there. It's just didn't expect it to take quite so long. So, I'm going to turn bumps off. Often for timber, you don't need bumps. So, that's going to give you the depth, which... for bricks and tiles might be a good thing, but overkill for timber usually. And I'm not even going to worry about the size of this because it's just taking too long. That's crazy. And I'm going to have to do it all again in a second anyway. So, okay, so I've changed it here. That's definitely a new material. But if I then load into project, yep, doesn't matter which option you choose here, even if I choose override existing added parameter values. That's right, now if we go back to here, hasn't changed. So what's the problem? The reason it hasn't changed is if we go to manage and then materials, Timber 2 was loaded into this project before when I first brought the family in. So now there's a version of Timber 2 in the family file and there's a different version in this project file. So changing Timber 2 in the family file has no effect on Timber 2 in the project file. So I need to go and repeat the changes in here and do all of that again. So there's a way around that though, and it's simply to use a parameter. So I'm going to select this and add in a parameter, and that makes it useful for anyone else who uses this family, and also for myself if I use it in other projects. It's much easier to adjust the material if I've got a parameter there to do that. So it's fairly simple to add a parameter. Materials, if you haven't done much with parameters, materials are the best way to start. Just next to the material name there, you've got that button, that grey button. Click on that, choose add parameter, and we're just going to call this, let's say, table top. And that's all I need to say. And then just so it's clear, I'll do the legs as well. And so I'm going to click on the same button once I've selected the legs there, and I'll go to add parameter and we'll call this table leg or legs. So now I'll load that back into the project. Override, doesn't matter which option there. So now, even in the perspective view, I can select that table, go to edit type, and you can see then I've got the option to change that material in the type properties. So you'll find lots of families that you get from Revit City and other places won't have the parameters set up, because often they'll just assign the material at the beginning and then they don't think they need to change it. But you should really put parameters in when you're making your own, and you can easily add them to other people's families as well. So now I can go to here and easily change that the same way as I did before. Let's just get the same one. Okay, so now I could have just gone to materials. I know it was Timber 2. I could have just changed Timber 2 in there, but I just want to make it clear to you how you should be doing it. Right, so I've got that different material there, and then looking maybe at some other options you have. I'm just going to put in a wall surface in the plan here. Now, we wouldn't normally have a mirror in a space like this, so I don't think I'll keep this, but I just wanted to give you a look at some of the other things. Okay, so I'll just put a wall there so I can give a material to it. And so you can always assign materials in the wall type properties or type properties for a family, of course. But there might be cases where you just want to override a material. So have you used the paint option very much?
Yeah, we did.
So that's really useful. So I'm just going to put a mirror material onto this surface. And you can do paint in perspectives, which is good. But the interesting thing about paint is that you can choose most of the surfaces, but you can't choose, say, things in families. So I don't know if you can see there, but I can highlight the wall and the floor. If I can get the edge of the floor somewhere, should be there somewhere. That's it. I know that's something else. And yeah, you can get floors definitely, walls, ceilings. There's a ceiling up the top there. But notice it ignores the desks and the chairs because they're families. Now, you can paint families, you just need to be editing them. So if you go edit family, then you can use paint inside the family. So I'm going to paint the wall though. But like I said, I want a mirror. And if I go to the paint tool, you'll see I don't have a mirror material. So do you know what you need to do if you want a material that isn't there in that panel when you're using paint or something like that?
What I do, I duplicate a material that's similar and
Yeah.
I change the reflectivity.
Oh yeah, you can do all of that, but then how do you can't duplicate in here. So you just need to know how to get to materials. So going to manage, you can obviously go to materials there without selecting anything. So that's the main thing. And then, so you can make the material before you use the paint tool, basically, like you're saying. So yeah, so once you go to manage, then materials. The mirror material is really easy to make. You can either start with, like you're saying, a material that's close, like glass, and duplicate that. Or, if you bring up the main material library using the button at the top here that shows that panel down below, you'll see that there is a material called mirror in here. Yeah, so there's a mirror material there. So I'm just going to add that to my project. So there's mirror. Okay, so there is actually a mirror material type. So you can see there it's called mirror. And it's only got one property, the colour. That's it. It just reflects and you don't need to adjust that. So if you want to make that from scratch, you can right click on appearance, go to replace, and you'll see in the appearance library there's a mirror folder which has a few different types of mirrors. So this one here, for example, doesn't have a tint. If I double click there, you'll see that the colour has changed slightly. Basic, it's basically the same. I don't know why they have two there. They're basically identical. Okay, so if you want that to be a lighter reflection, you can change the colour there. And, okay, so I'm just going to do a quick render. I might just check my sun. So I've got there the sun, I think, set to top right. I'm just going to change the sun settings here and use top left so that I get some sunlight in there. And I know actually what I'll do is I'll use still and I will make it back to front. I was going to say morning. So why can't I think of this? So yeah, no, I'm rising in the east, of course. Should get a better angle. Yeah, there we go. So I've got plenty of light there, and so I'm rendering with exterior sun only. If you're using sunlight, it doesn't matter which sun only option you use. If you use interior sun only or exterior, the only difference is the exposure. So if you do it with exterior sun only, just come back and change the exposure value.
Does the artificial lights work?
Oh yeah, they do. It's just hard to tell sometimes when you've got the sun on because the sun is thousands of times brighter than any artificial light source. So one trick is to just make the artificial lights really, really bright and then you'll notice them more. Also with the cloud's a little bit better at balancing the light because the cloud is basically a biased renderer. So they, in other words, they cheat to make things look the way you expect them to rather than rendering the way that things are in real life. And it's one of those things because on an overcast day, like today, you can see the lights inside really clearly. But I'm sure you've all seen on a bright sunny day when you've got, yeah, that's right, the lights on in a balcony or something, yeah, it's hard to know. And so our eyes actually adjust very quickly when you look outside. Even if you've got a brightly lit interior, your eyes will adjust very quickly to compensate for the amount of sunlight. Okay, so you can see there it's taking a long time to render. I thought that on draft this would race through, but
Probably the fab.
sorry.
Probably all your fabrics that you got in there.
Yeah, it should slow down a little bit, but it shouldn't be this bad. I mean, I've rendered files 10 times this size, and they've been fine. But yeah, I've got a few things open. So once it starts, that shouldn't be too bad. So it started doing it there. The first half is final gather, and that can actually go a lot more slowly than the second half. So once it gets past this up to 50%, it should speed up a bit. But my God, 2 minutes just to get to 10% on draft. That's crazy. Having said that though, the computers that I started working on would have been more than 1,000 times slower than this. So it's just... yeah, okay, now, what's happening there? That's common, that's something you'll see quite a bit. So don't worry when you see that. Do you know what the most common cause of what's happening there? A blank screen? It's usually because the camera's inside something. So the camera's inside a wall. I know that I do have my camera very close to the wall there. So I'll show you how to fix that. That's an easy thing. And you need to think about these things once you start testing out your materials. So that's where my camera is in plan. And if I now go and find the view and then right click on that view name in 3D views. Exactly, yeah. So you can see there my camera's in the wall. That's it. So I'm just going to move that forward slightly and then go back to the view.
Camera in the wall.
Yeah. So it's a common issue. Often it'll let you see in the shaded view, but yeah, not when you render. So just have to go and render again. So I'm going to turn shadows off and do a few other things just to make it go a bit faster. So I'm going to set that back to shaded as well. So I did want to show you a few other things to do with reflections especially. But it is going very slowly. Yeah, so while that's happening, what I might do is just show you quickly then ways of getting materials. And here we go.
Through Google Images.
Yeah, well that's right, you can get textures that way, definitely. So that's where we'll start. And then I'll show you how you can get some actual complete materials.
It takes time. Just give it some maybe. Yes, it's right. We're fine. We're fine.
And now that is frozen. And here we go, woken up. Which one? Oh yeah, sure, I'm nearly done. I won't go too much longer with this. Okay, so you probably have an idea anyway. You can search for textures. The keyword is seamless and textures. So if you're looking for wood seamless texture. You can pay for them, and the paid ones are much better than the ones that you'll find that are free. But they're expensive. I mean, I've bought quite a few texture packs over the years. For, say, timber, you might get a couple of dozen images for a couple hundred. Yep. So the Arrowway used to make beautiful textures. And they're amazing. But they're really big files as well. But the ones that I usually buy these days are the HDR images that you use for lighting and things like that. And yeah, they're about the same price, between 100 and 200 usually. Okay, so finally that's open. So here we go. So you can just search for, again, so wood or timber, seamless texture. And you get a lot online these days that is all free. A good option there is to go to the search options and set the size to large or even higher than one of these resolutions, but large is probably okay. The ones that I pay for are in the thousands, so often 4,000 by 4,000 or something like that. You can see here this big one is still only 1,600 by 1066.
You get some pretty big ones.
Oh yeah, you definitely, yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. So that should open, and I can just save that and use it. Oh yeah, so here we go, Max Textures. So that's for 3ds Max, and you can be pretty sure that they will repeat seamlessly. Even though that one they've made it seamless, you can tell just by the look of it, and it may not look all that good, but let's have a look. Let's try it out. You can also try sites for particular programs. So there's a Mental Ray Materials site that's got complete materials. So instead of just having a texture, it's got the whole setup of the material. But that is set up more for programs like 3ds Max, where you have the full version of Mental Ray, unlike Revit. Okay, so I'll just save this with those other textures so you can get to it. Oh boy. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, yeah, so there you can see it's got this this mirror material, but it looks like the same material as the walls. Because when you have a mirror that's perfectly reflective, it will just mirror everything. And, oh no, sorry, that one is, sorry, I didn't even get to paint that. Sorry, that was my test render. So I will mirror. It should look the same though. So what I want to show you now, if I go to Modify, then Paint, now I can choose my mirror material. It should be in the list here. Here it is, mirror, and then paint that wall. There we are. And so I'll just quickly render that again before we go back to the texture. So if you had a look at decals, I haven't done decals. Okay, so if you want to put a picture on a wall or anywhere, so for signage, it works well as well. So you can use any image as well. And so what I should have really pointed out there while that was all happening and we were waiting is that the formats are all just standard image formats. So you'll see all the files in that Autodesk Material Library, all the files that I'm just copying across now for you in Material Images are formats that you probably all will recognise. So let's just go to List here. So do you know, I'm sure you all know JPEGs, but then do you know any of the other common image formats? TIFF definitely, yeah.
PNG.
PNG, yeah, they're probably the most common ones. TGA is a really good one. BMP, there are dozens of them, but yeah, so those are the main ones, as long as you've got some idea about those. And so you can use any of those formats, and that means you can make your own easily in Photoshop. So you can get photos you've taken of textures or signs or paintings, anything that you want to use as a texture, and then use that in a material.
Can you show off like how you add people in Photoshop, like how to scale them?
Oh yes, sure. So I'll do that with the decal actually, and show you that. So so there we are. So there's the mirror texture. I'll come back to reflection maybe in a moment. So I might just adjust the exposure here and make that a bit brighter. Okay, so what I'll show you first is a decal. So I might delete that and I'll come back to reflective materials before long. But then I'm just going to go to this section box view. Okay, so you can't apply decals in a perspective. You can only put decals in a view that's not a perspective. Any other view type, you can apply decals. Just going to hide this. So I might want a picture on the wall up here. So I'm going to go to Insert. Okay, so you can see on the Insert tab you've got the decal option. So decals are very similar to materials. And I've actually seen, if any of my interior design guys are listening, don't take it badly, but I've seen some of my interior design people use decals for all of their materials. So a student did it last semester. It kind of made sense for her design because she had a lot of different textures in her space. So it was a really textured design and lots of really interesting materials. It was a good design, but with decals over every surface, it became very difficult to do anything with that file. It still looked good, it was just difficult to work with. So clicking on the decal tool there, if you click on the down arrow, you can just go to Place Decal. And if it's the first one, it will ask you to define a type. If it's not your first one, then you can easily edit as you go anyway, just like placing a family or a wall or anything else. And that is still very slow. Okay, well, while that's happening, I'll show you some of the textures that I've got set up for decals. So looking at some of these images, okay, so it's taking a minute there. It should show the previews in a second. There we are. Okay, so you'll see that a lot of these images have a cutout that goes with them. And so what you can do with a decal, I'm not going to do straight away because it'll just take too long, but just to get you thinking about what decals can do and generally what you can do with image maps. Okay, so I've got there an image of a plant, and so accompanying that is a black and white version, which should be next. And in the one that's opening now, the part of the plant that you want to be solid is white, and then the background is black. So you use that image to cut out the surface. And that's often how plants are done. So I know with Revit they've got the RPC plants, and then they have a lot of 3D plants, and you'll notice that sometimes those plants are bigger than the rest of the file put together. And you don't need that. For most architectural models, you don't need to have really detailed 3D plans. And even for high-end 3D things, they don't use full 3D plans for most of it. So they'll do what I'm showing you now, just have a 2D image and use a photo of the plan, and then have this thing called an opacity map, or basically a cutout that cuts around the image of the plan. And I can't believe it's taking so long just to load one image. It's still loading it. It will get there in the end. Maybe the preview's not there and you can see it. Well, you can see it there now. So here, this one still hasn't opened, but we've got the people there. So that's the person, or the two girls, and then we've got the cutout that goes with it. Okay, so that's a standard opacity map, and you can do that with a decal. I'm going to do a simpler one, and here we are. So I've clicked on the decal button. This is what comes up. So it's asking me to make a new decal type before I put it in. So clicking on the new decal button there, and now I'll call it painting, or poster maybe, is really what it is. Poster 1, might have a few different posters. Okay, so then I just need to click Browse to choose the image. So yeah, if you need to go, then that's fine. I'm going to post this on YouTube. Yep. Okay, there we are. So now I do have paintings that are being copied across, but they're still on their way. So I'm just going to grab a different image. Well, it lets me. So maybe I'll just choose this speech photo. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, well, if you think this is slow, has anyone tried Lumion on these computers? Yeah, so it's interesting. I've got it working last couple of weeks. And I tried it out with a 100 meg file, and it was working, but I just had to be very patient in between doing things. But I got it to record a few movies and things, so it does work. But yeah, it's slower than this. Just the way it is. Well, while that's all happening, I can show you some work that's using decals, maybe to give you some ideas. Because having said that my interior students are not sometimes always interested in the technical things, they do amazing design work. I think some of the best designers I've ever seen at Enmore. And so I've got some examples in here. Show you. A lot of these use decals throughout. Okay, so there's that's a decal over there on the wall, and then same project. So for the floor as well. So these rugs are all done just with decals. Again, another decal over there. These are actually done in families. And, well, actually this was done with Photoshop, so the people here were all added afterwards in Photoshop, which is another option. So you can do even a lot of the texturing in Photoshop, but definitely things like people that are just floating in space. If you try to do them with a decal in Revit, it's sometimes overkill, and you need to put a surface in for that, which really isn't necessary, because again, it's probably better to do in Photoshop. So again here, the rug on the floor, I just did that with a decal. Same with the picture over there on the wall. And, well there, that one, they're all 3D trees. And that took hours to render, just because of the trees. The building's simple, I'm sure you all know Barcelona Pavilion, oh sorry, not the Farnsworth House, is a very simple building, but and it renders really quick without the. So this one is the same file with the background instead of all the 3D trees, and that took 5 minutes to render, but the other one took hours just because of the trees. But it was useful having the 3D trees to get things like the shadows here, which I wouldn't have had if. Well, you can get them from an image, but it's much easier from a 3D. Okay, so again, well, that's similar to a decal. So again, here just some more examples of decals, and for backgrounds as well, you can use an image, of course, and we'll have a look at that. If you want to do a custom background, you can put them into Revit, and we'll see that in a second. Using the render options, you can choose an image, but it's much better to do that with Photoshop. So I might show you that quickly in a second as well. So, like I've been promised, I want to spend some time going through Photoshop with you. So what I might quickly show you now, if I do a quick render, is how to get the background with Photoshop, and that's similar to using the decals.
Which one's easier and faster?
Photoshop. Yeah. Because with Revit, every time you make a change to the background, you've got to re-render it. This takes time, and then even when you're doing that, it's much harder to control the background independently of the rest of the render. But in Photoshop, it's all immediate, so you can make changes to the background without affecting the render, and vice versa. So it's much faster. The only reason I think would ever do the background in Revit is if you're doing maybe animation, but if you're doing animation, you would do it differently anyway. I'd use a compositing program for that. Okay, and it's crashed. Great. Okay, so this is.
So what is decal?
So it's the word comes from sticker essentially. So it was a transfer print in the old days when they first, stickers probably were invented about 100 years ago, and so that's really what it is. You're taking an image and you're sticking it onto a surface. Yeah. So for paintings, posters on walls, all those things, they're really useful.
So how do you stick like in a 3D view, or stick on a?
It could be in a section view. Yeah. Or in a plan, if you want to put them on the floor, you can do them in plan as well.
Where do you get to get that decal?
Oh, so just on the insert tab, and then you've got the decal button there. Yeah. So I'm just going to save this file. I have to reopen it. And unfortunately, I can't. I've got a bunch of demo files that I would usually use for this that run a bit faster, but they're all saved in 2016, so I can't show you those on these computers with MetaRay. So we don't need that one. Don't need that one.
Why do you have to use a portfolio when they have a portfolio?
Portfolio is not mandatory. It's like, I think it's called artworks or marketing. Just in case you feel like do it directly yourself, they don't look on the portfolio.
Oh, V-Ray. I use V-Ray for everything.
V-Ray.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so just going to choose that decal again, and it should. Here we go. This one a little bit faster now. Okay, there we go. And I've got my paintings folder now, which is what I wanted. So here we go. So paintings and... so I've just got some images there. Let's go for the Mondrian. So you can use any file, of course. And so once you've selected it and placed it, it's fairly easy to just, again, select it and then use the grips there to change the size. It's that easy. So here you can't see it in the perspective just because I'm in shaded, but if I go to realistic, just like the textures, that image is going to show up there. So yeah, so for anything like that, it's actually good to use decals because working out the perspective and the lighting and everything else in Photoshop is extra work that you shouldn't need to do. But it still is helpful to add things in Photoshop quite often or enhance textures. And so I did mean to start Photoshop up before, but I'll just get that started while I'm talking. And so again, maybe just flicking through some of these images here so you can see the people here, they've all been added with Photoshop rather than trying to use the RPC people or any of the automatic ones that you get with Revit. This is Revit. It's not using 3D rendering or anything like that. This is just rendered straight out of Revit. So same here, all Revit. None of this was done.
Just like, are you recording this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And get it off from YouTube, right?
Yeah. So these are basically all Revit, all older. So I'm only showing you things that were done with software that we have. So these people again were added with Photoshop. Just out of interest, which program do you think was used to do the 3D modelling and the rendering? Yes, I haven't used any 3D programs for this. This was all done with software you've got. It's not Revit. It's AutoCAD. Yep. That is straight AutoCAD. Just 3D AutoCAD and rendering using AutoCAD as well. So, yeah, Revit can definitely do a better job than this though. But that's, yeah, so all of those ones I just showed you, that's all AutoCAD. AutoCAD again. AutoCAD. But again, the people make a big difference there. Having entourage gives a sense of scale, context, how the space is going to be used, all of those important things. The textures, on the other hand, they weren't done with Photoshop just because they're used for the rendering as well. So they do give some lighting effects and things like that. So yeah, it's good to mix it up and do things in different ways. So back into Revit now. What I might do is just a very quick render here, just to show you some of the options you have. So I'm going to go to interior side only, just so the exposure is better. And I will start that rendering. And so what you'll see when you render locally with Revit is that you can, just redrawing it, so you can save as a PNG and that will give you an automatic alpha channel for your background. So in other words, it will cut out the sky and make that area transparent. And so if you open the file in Photoshop, it's automatically got that area, yeah, so you can just stick your background in that way. So that's a good option. With the cloud, you just need to choose that option when you send it to render.
Yeah.
So, and then you can do exactly the same thing. So slow again. Anyhow, it's starting to work now. So while that's happening, I'll open up some files in Photoshop that can be used for different things. So again, just focusing still on textures, but this time maybe things that can be used for cutouts as well. So back to material images. So I've got those files I just showed you briefly. If I go to large icons. So I've got the files there that are cut out, or that have the cutout associated with them. But if you look in the people folder there, I've got some that I haven't actually cut out, so you'd have to cut those out. But then I've got others where the cutout is done as part of the Photoshop file.
How do you do the cutout?
Oh yes, I'm going to show you that now. So, okay, so this one here, which one's the cutout version? I think that's the cutout version. So you'll see here, it's got the checkerboard pattern showing, which means that area is transparent. So she's already had that, well, I've cut that out around that woman. And I'll open up the original. Okay, so this is the original file. Which actually is already cut out, so that's a bad example. I've got others here which are not. So here's one here, so the one I showed you before. Okay, so the resolution's not great, but I'm sure you get the idea. So this one has a black background, and you could just use the magic wand there. So under this one, and select everything that's black. Now, it's only got one layer here, so it's a good idea to make additional layers. I don't know why that's greyed out now. Maybe I'll just do a save as, and save the file as Photoshop, so at the moment that's a TIFF. So if I go to PSD, and save, might take a minute. Should then give me options for layers. Okay, while that's happening, keep going through some of these. It's not my favourite building, go past that one. Yeah, so you can see some different ways of using textures here. So again, you can use them to give lighting effects as well, but you need to do that as part of the material. But you can use the same image for lighting as for the actual appearance of the material, which can be really useful. But again, sometimes simple materials can work even better. So I was really happy with. So this one, very simple materials, but sometimes they can be equally effective. So don't forget all the other properties you have in materials, things like the reflection, the glossiness, all those different things, which can be really effective on their own, just with a plain colour. Okay, so finally woken up. All right, now, I'm just not really sure why it's not letting me do anything with layers. Let's see here. Maybe it's just because it's locked. I don't think why it wouldn't. Let's see, it's because I've got something selected. No. Why can't I make layers here? Okay, what I'm going to do is just copy this into a new file. When this happens, often it is easier just to make a new file. So good trick there, Control A, Control C, selects everything and then copies it. And if you go to the File menu and then New, it'll pick up that there's something on the clipboard and make a new blank file exactly the same size as the original that you've copied or whatever you've got on the clipboard. So if I do Control V now to paste, it'll fit in exactly. And so now see I've got all the options in my layers. I don't know what was wrong with the other file, but it doesn't matter. It's easy to make a new one. So I've got this on layer 1. Background I'm going to turn off, and I'm going to make a new layer in between just to show you some things on that in a second. So again, I can just use the magic wand and, well, firstly, it's selecting everything there because I'm on layer 2. I go to layer 1, which has the image on it, and then again use the magic wand. Now it's going to pick up what's on that layer. You can sample across all layers, but often you will just want to pick up one layer. And so now I can delete using the delete button on the keyboard, and that will clear. So when you're working within Photoshop, it can work with transparencies without a problem. Other programs can't. So rendering programs, for example, often need the transparent, or the part that you want to be cut out, done as a separate map. And so that's why you'll have that, that cutout map, which you can see we've got here. Now, it's probably cut out better than what I've just done with the magic wand. So I could potentially use that. So you can actually even bring this in. So I'll just deselect everything. So I'm just going to do Control A, Control C, go to the layer, so I go to the file with the image in it, and I'll go back using the history panel, and I'll go back to what I had before, and I might go back, so I do want my extra layer. So I'm going to just paste that extra layer in, so I've got that as a separate layer. And now I can use it to select the white area using the magic wand. And I'm going to go select inverse to change that to the black area. And then now back to layer 1, turn that back on. So now I'm working on layer 1, and turn layer 2 off, but I've still got the same selection that I picked up from layer 2. And then I can, again, just use delete on the keyboard to clear out. And that probably is, you can see it's cut out slightly better. So you can do the cutout quickly, but even here you can see there are areas that need to be refined. So that's a bit dark around there. So if I was doing this for my own purposes, I would go the extra mile and use a layer mask to do this, so that I can go back and forth. So I'll show you. I will show you layer masks later on. But the quick and dirty way is just to manually erase the things you don't want. So using the eraser tool. And then, have you done any work in Photoshop?
Yeah.
So you know how to set brush sizes and things like that?
No, we did a long time ago.
Oh,
So I
okay.
don't remember.
Right, okay. Well, there are shortcuts, but if you right-click, you get the options there for size and hardness,
Yeah.
which at first is all you need. So I'm going to just make that size less, so that it will let me work with a bit finer detail. So probably not quite 1, maybe 2 or 3 or 4. Yep. And then I can just go in and erase the parts that I don't want. The issue with this is that I can't go back. So if I realise that I've made a mistake, unless I undo straight away, I've lost it for good. So unless I want to go right back. So that's the problem, and that's why people often will do masking for this, because you can go back and forth, because you don't lose the pixels when you clear them with a mask. Okay, so, and there are again more advanced ways of doing it, deep etching and all these other things you can look at, but erasing, if you're careful, is pretty good. So it's going around there. You can give them a bit of a diet or whatever, make them a bit skinnier than they are, usually isn't noticeable. And there, I've gone too far, so, oops.
Is there any undo button?
Yeah, there is, but see, undo in Photoshop's a bit confusing because it goes back and forth. So undo turns into redo. So it's like you're undoing the undo.
So you can only do one undo?
Yeah, well, at first it might seem like that when you just use undo. But if you have that history panel open, you can go back as far as you want. So, yeah, so it is almost unlimited undo, but you do it through history, that's all. So I can go forward a bit, but not that far. That's it. So, so there we are, and then save as. So there are definitely, parts I'd want to fix there. But, okay, so saving this, you can save it as a Photoshop file. It's always good to have that as a reference. So, what are those, schoolgirls?
Does it increase the file size? Or is it
A little bit, but not by much. Photoshop files are bigger, but not that much. So then, a lot of formats like PNG, as we've been seeing, but also TIFF, can store the transparency. JPEGs generally can't. So if I save it as a JPEG, you can see it actually shows you, with the solid background.
So, TIFF, you said?
Yeah, TIFFs can store it. PNGs are often the best though, because PNGs are small like a JPEG, but they can store all those other things.
Can you show us how to scale the photo?
Oh yeah, so I'll do that in another file. So this one's low res. You can't increase the resolution, but I'll use the other one because the other one was a better resolution. This one here.
Yeah.
So okay, so that's done. So if I save that by using export and use PNG as the format, it'll automatically do an alpha channel or the transparency for the background.
What about TIFF? The same?
TIFF will store it, but it's harder to access it. So PNGs are easier just because it's automatic.
Alright.
Yeah. So all that's fine, I'll just leave it as that, 30v1. Okay, so while that's all happening, I will send another one off to the cloud. So when you enter the cloud, it doesn't really matter which format you save with. You need to set the option to do an alpha channel before you send it. So that'll come up in a second. Come on. Oh, no, sorry, I thought I went to it. So I just signed in, so it won't come up. So I've got to go to the View tab, and then here we go, rendering cloud. There we are. So I just saw that, and okay, so I'll set the quality to final. Image, normally I'd go fairly big here, but just so it goes fast, I'll go to large. And then the most important thing, alpha, does that transparent background. So I'll leave that going. While that's happening, you can go and open the one I've just rendered. There it is. Okay, very low quality of course, but you can see this part is all transparent.
Yeah.
So usually what I'll do here is just copy that layer by dragging that thumbnail onto the new layer button. And that way you can keep the original and turn, as a background, turn that off, and then work on the copy. So I'll go and open up a file that I can use as a background. Why do I have to look at this every time? Here it is. So I've got a couple of folders here for background images. Maybe that one's not the best. I'll just choose a sky actually. Okay, so again, easy way to copy, Control A, Control C, and then Control V. Yeah, exactly. And then you can scale it using Control T. Is the shortcut for transform. Yep. Sure. So if you hold down Shift when you drag on these grips on the corner, it keeps it in proportion. Which isn't a bad idea. And then double click to finish. And then if you go to the Move tool, or select a move.
Put it behind it.
Exactly.
Sorry. Control T, what did that do?
Transform.
Transform.
Yep. So I'll just do it again, Control T, and then you can see I've got these handles on the corner.
Okay.
So I can stretch it using those. So those ones in the middle, just stretch it either up and down or left and right. Cancel that. So if you don't want to apply the transform, you can click on the cancel button there. And I'll just revert. So this is obviously over the top of my render, but I can exactly drag the layer down below. Here we are. And so now I can make adjustments to those two layers independently. If I go to Image and then Adjustments, and then Exposure or Brightness Contrast or Hue Saturation, they're all ways of changing the intensity of that background or anything. So if I use lightness there, that'll be darker or lighter.
One other thing, like if I bring a pupil in, is it just Control T and then scale it in?
Yep, pretty much, yep. So brightness contrast, and then one of my favourites is exposure. And gamma correction is one that I think people don't use anywhere
You
near
can
enough.
also do it on the image, like the layer that we're working on, like the other layer.
Oh yes, of course, yep. So that's just the background.
Click on that layer and then it's...
Exactly. So this is the background. If I go to the render, then yeah, exactly like you're saying. So I can go and adjust the exposure there, and
Oh, yeah.
see that change without the background changing. So I'll just check on my render. It's probably not finished yet, so I'll come back to that. But then to get a person in, if it's all done in Photoshop and you've got the transparency all done there as well, you don't need to worry about the cutout layer or anything like that. Just copy the layer with the transparency. So
If we bring the people in,
Yep.
remember we showed like you can also rotate the people, like is it like
rotate.
yeah, like the people since the girl is just this way, you
Yeah.
can make it move that way, like the side face. Is it possible?
No. That's with RPC. In Revit you can, because they're 3D, but not with Photoshop. They're just flat 2D.
Alright.
You can rotate them. You can tilt them,
Yeah.
but no, you can't rotate in 3D. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, how do you tilt them?
Yeah, I'll show you. So I've just done Control A, Control C to copy that onto the clipboard, and then now back to here, Control V will paste it into a new layer. Don't worry if they're bigger than the frame. Control T will let you exactly stretch it down and then move it back up. And you can just keep doing that. Okay, so again, holding down Shift keeps it in proportion. So a good trick actually is to do just a draft render with the RPC people. You'll get sick of the RPC people in Revit because there are only about 10 of them. But you can do one in draft, so it renders really quickly, and then just use that to work out the size the people should be and the shadows and things like that, and then do a high quality render with the people hidden, and then you can replace them with better people in Photoshop. So here, I'd say her legs will be hidden by the chair. Okay, so that's
The girl supposed to be a bit smaller.
well, yeah. So if she was, I mean, if her feet were there, that's probably maybe a tiny bit smaller. But yeah, so the doors here, that's a good guide actually. So the head's probably a little bit higher. Yeah. So the eyes should be almost in line with the horizon. That's the general way of working it out. So yeah, so she's probably a little bit normal and smaller than normal height, so yeah, that's about right, I think. So, but yeah, because the resolution of the person is so much better than the rest, it does look a bit weird. So again, to cut that out, you could just delete. Later on, again, I'll show you layer masks for that, but again, for now, you could just go and it's not showing me a preview of the brush. See how it's working. It should show you the brush. I'm used to newer version of Photoshop 2. This one, no. I don't know why it doesn't show the brush sometimes, but anyway, you can see there it's deleted her. But I can't bring those feet back if I decide she's going to go somewhere else. So that's why sometimes layer masks, you'll see later on, are better.
What was that button, sorry?
Oh, this is just the eraser.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So let's see how the cloud's going. Yeah, still going. Okay, so I won't wait for that, but that would work the same with the alpha, and the quality would be much better. I'm not going to wait for that. I thought it might be further into it.
How do you create a shadow?
Oh, yeah, okay. So essentially using that selection, so a good trick there is to just select everything except that, or, sorry, another way. So you can do that and then do select inverse. That's a quick way. Another option is just to right-click on the layer and go select pixels, which will select everything that's got a colour value. So if you've done your transparency properly, then that should select just the person. And then make a new layer, and I can fill that with black. And I'll move it to the top so you can see. So it's just a black fill. And then I'm going to go to transform and skew. Yeah, well, you can use all these different options, but yeah, skew's a good one because that'll just let you change the angle. So I'm going to get that to what I want. Here, she's not going to cast much of a shadow because she's in the shadow, but that would be the angle. And you can also we'll scale that down. So if we go to transform, scale, the perspective tool can be good here. If you use perspective warp, that is great for other things too. But for now, I'm just going to go to free transform, which is the one that you get with Control T, and just bring that down. That should be pretty close. So yeah, not far off, but I'd then need to go and skew that again a little bit just to get the angle right. Okay, so that's...
You can also adjust the exposure for the shadow, right?
Oh yeah, so that's just to get the actual shadow, but then often the best way is to use blends. So here you've got the options for the layers, and if you go to multiply, and then adjust the opacity. That's a good way of doing shadows. So you can just leave the fill black, and then the opacity level determines how dark it is. And that way, if you've got, say, a pattern on your floor or whatever the shadow's being cast onto, you're going to see through the shadow and see that texture still. So I'll just deselect that, Control D deselects. So that shadow now, I can move it under the layer that the person's on, and she'll go in front of it. So yeah, so that's a good way. And so you can do reflections using a similar approach. And yeah, they're the main things. So the render is getting there. Yeah, it's just not going to quite finish in time. What else can I show with Photoshop quickly then? Probably not a lot. No, so look, that's probably enough on textures and things to do with that. So I'll go further with Photoshop next week, and I'll do lighting then as well.